Hello, church. It's Pastor Ben. Hope you're all having a great week. Wow. It's been quite a busy last week here for me. I'm recording this actually on Saturday evening, the day before, um, this sermon is intended for, so that I can hopefully have it up and running for you guys on Sunday right after church, like I usually would like to. And I'm glad I'm able to do that this week. But we just finished up at Heartland with our VBS for this week that ran Sunday through Thursday, and we had about 50 kids almost, roughly, which is about 30 to 30 less than we normally have. We usually shoot for 100 and we get close, but we never had less than 80. So this was a really low year for us, but that's been the way it is with COVID. Unfortunately, there's still some people who aren't ready to come back to things, or maybe they've just gotten out of the habit of doing things. And we're also a lot of people on vacations this year too. I think people are taking extra vacations or longer vacations just because they couldn't do that last year. So hopefully next year things will get back to normal. Kids camp was the week before that, and we had about 40 kids for the whole district for that. That was also about half of normal, and but that was. It's just nice to be able to finally get back to some bit of normal as far as to having these events again, because I love doing them, and they're a big part of just normal life. I love to see the kids at camp, and I love to see the kids at VBS and just having those experiences. So, and there's something about, like, especially with VBS, when kids ministry gets to kind of take over the whole church. It's kind of neat. So, um, yeah, and we had district conference this week. I just went up there this morning. Actually, had to be there at 8:30, and that was a little tough since I'd worked the night before. But um, and we had a very short district conference, which was kind of nice actually. Those can get a little long sometimes, but Pastor Tim kept things moving, and it was good. And I see some good things happening in this district as far as the Wesleyan Church goes. So, anyway, enough about that. Let's go ahead and dive into where we're at today. We are in week 6 of our Life Hacks series. So we're focusing on who is wise this week. And now, um, if you were in church this week, you will have noticed that I had actually played a video to begin this segment. I can't play that video here because I don't own the video. So it's not like some previous weeks where I've been able to purchase rights to the video. This is just something that I'm able to use in church but not post online. But basically, what happens in this video is that it's kind of funny actually. There's these two guys in a coffee place, and one of them pulls out this card and he pays for this person's coffee, and he says, "I just want you to know that you matter." And so it's kind of a nice thing. It's a little way of saying, hey, you matter to God, and you matter to me as well. And the person whose coffee got paid for was really touched by that. And so then these two guys are sitting down, and then it kind of turns into a little bit of a one-upmanship game. One of them says, "Well, that was probably the least you can do is buy somebody's coffee, right?" And so, and he says, "I just bought this coat for this homeless kid, and then it was like, well, or whatever. It was a really nice coat too." And the other person said, "Well, I just paid somebody's heating bills for a whole year." And then it goes back and forth and back and forth. These guys are continually trying to one up each other and about their good deeds, their good works and such. And one of them says, "I gave away a kidney, to a veteran," and it's, and then another one says, "Well, I just bought a car for somebody," and he said, the other one finally says, "Well, I'm gonna buy a car for everybody in this room," You know, and then it shows to a little clip of he says, "You're getting a car, and you're getting a car, and you're getting a car," and then everybody's chanting this guy's name, and he's up on a table going, "Yeah," and it's like, well, we can kind of see where their hearts are, can't we? And I can tell you, my friends, if you're using your good deeds like this, you're totally missing the point about what God wanted you to do when it comes to works. Certainly we already talked about boasting in this series, but today we're going to be talking about wisdom. And we can see that this is something that James is concerned about. He starts out in chapter 3, he starts out in verse 13 talking about this. He says, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom." He's saying there should be evidence of wisdom by how you live your life and your deeds as well. He's saying these should be done in humility that comes from wisdom. Now, obviously, these two guys were not showing humility. In fact, they weren't showing wisdom either. They were both going way too far. I have a feeling that neither one of them could really, if they even did these things, if they weren't just lying about the things they've done, they had spent way more probably out of their means, and one of them is giving up a kidney, the other one is buying cars for everybody. It's like, you know, is this, good deeds to be to help people, or is it to make oneself look good? Well, I don't believe that these people were showing wisdom. And their names were actually Matt and Travis. And were they doing good deeds? Well, sure. Were they practicing wisdom? Probably not, because they were doing probably more than they should, as far as more than they could even afford, really. And were they practicing humility? Definitely not. In fact, this whole conversation kind of makes you look back at the fact that when that one guy bought coffee for this other person, he did it in front of his friend. Was he trying to show off? Who knows? I don't know. Maybe that one started out innocent. But my friends, often we see in our relationships part of our struggles and strifes come from a decision that was not wise. In this game of one-upmanship, as I mentioned earlier, if it actually happened, I can only imagine how much money they would have spent. And and one of them has given away a kidney. That's not a cheap procedure. And then all of a sudden, one of them is buying cars. I mean, it's like, who is he, Oprah? I mean, come on, right? And it's not wise. And we can all kind of see where these guys' hearts were, right? I mean, their hearts weren't in the right place. Sometimes it's easy to do good for the wrong motives. A lot of our struggles, a lot of our mistakes in life can be prevented if we engage in a little wisdom. So if we look back into James, again starting in verse 13 on chapter 3, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come from heaven, but is earthly and spiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice." Wow. James doesn't mince words, does he? See, once again, we're getting a couple of things that we need to know and a few things that we need to do in James this week. He says, the first thing we need to know, and I've talked about this before, I believe, is there are two kinds of wisdom. There's the wisdom from above and there's the wisdom from below. Now, the earthly wisdom, which is below, and then there's God's wisdom, which is above. Above comes from God, our Creator, and below comes from the world. Now, to understand ourselves and how we see wisdom, we need to understand our nature. Now, my friends, we are a spiritual being enclosed in a physical earthly body. Now, God is spirit. This is the part, our spirit inside of us is what's the part that's like him. God says we are made in his image. He's talking about our spirit. Now, the other part of ourselves is our physical body. It's made up of the earth. As it says in the Bible, he created humankind from dust, literally. And our DNA is part of the earth. I mean, it's part of the building blocks that God used to make this world and everything in it. So, it's that's why we see a lot of commonalities in different parts of different animals and different, because we're all made from the same building blocks, basically. Now, one of these things is permanent, the spirit and the body, and one of them is not. Now, when we die, our body decays, it's left behind, but the spirit, the part that is made in the image of God, endures, and it basically we either go to heaven or we suffer a second death, so to speak. It's in separation from God and in hell for eternity. Now, my friends, this makes us different than the animals of the earth. I love the idea of that Disney movie where it says all dogs go to heaven. I love to think that, my the first dog in my life, Raven, a lab who, I knew when she was older in life and she was suffering from arthritis and not very active. I would love to think that that she and the other dog in my life, Brandy, are scampering around up in heaven, waiting for me, having a great time, playing all day. But there's nothing in the Bible that would indicate to me that dogs go to heaven. And animals, we don't. They're not. They don't have that in common with us. Basically, they don't have an eternal destination. And I always used to say, well, if all dogs go to heaven, we all know where cats are going, right? Because I'm a dog lover myself. But yeah, you won't see animals holding a funeral. You won't see animals discussing the meaning of life. You won't see animals discussing the morality of a choice. You see, we wrestle with these things at a spiritual level that animals of the earth don't. That's what separates us from them. And when we sin, it puts us in darkness and we become distant from God. We become blind and we cannot discern real wisdom. Now, I spoke of camp a little while ago. One of the things we used to do at camp, we haven't done it these last few years, is something we call a counselor hunt, where all of the counselors in the kids camp, they go hide in the woods somewhere, within a certain area, and then the kids are put into groups and they go hunting for the counselors, basically. And we always dress up in black and we find good hiding spots, and it's not unheard of for a group of kids to walk right by a counselor in the dark and never see them. One of my favorite hiding spots was actually in the balcony on the dining hall. I'd be outside there and I'd be standing right up on the balcony in the dark with a squirt gun, and I'd be nailing them from above, and they still couldn't figure out where I was hiding or where all that water that was hitting them was coming from. And they would look around, and it never occurred to them that I was above them. And they would walk right by me, and they would walk right by other counselors and never see them. James is trying to tell us, we can be so close to the truth and not see it because we're stumbling around in the dark. The only way that they could ever find the counselors was with a light. And my friends, James is trying to tell us that the Bible is God's flashlight. It's His way to help us understand and navigate life. It's His way to help us shine the light on the truth. That's wisdom from above. Now, we'll talk a little bit about wisdom from below. The Bible describes it as earthly, unspiritual, and even demonic. The Bible basically kind of indicates that it's informed by the wisdom of fallen angels. Being fools, these angels chose to follow Lucifer, who we call Satan, and join him, and they joined him in a fight against God in heaven, and they were thrown out. Now, they want you to join them in their fallen state. That would be their revenge against God. So, and remember in general that sinners always want you to join them in what they're doing. We talked about that a week or so ago. Now, the wisdom of the earth, it often focuses on itself more and more, which is why you see the accumulation of stuff as a big priority in life and a measure of wealth. The wisdom of the earth will also scoff at heavenly wisdom and see it as crazy or absurd. There was a Geico commercial, and you can find it on YouTube if you want to watch it. It's not very long, obviously. It's a Geico commercial. It's kind of funny. Basically, if I set the stage, these people are characters in a horror movie, and the tag on the commercial is that people in horror movies make bad decisions. And you've watched movies, and you're thinking to yourself, don't go in there, don't go into that room, don't open that door. Well, this is kind of an illustration of that point, right? So these people run up to this creepy house, and it's a dark night, and they're afraid. They're trying to, they must be being chased or something. So they say, and they're looking around at this house. None of them want to go in the house. They see this running car with lights on and everything, and one of them says, "Hey, let's go to the car with the lights on. We can get out of here." And another guy says, "Are you crazy?" He says, "Let's go to the garage and hide behind all those chainsaws that are hanging from the ceiling." Doesn't sound wise, does it? So he says, "Are you crazy? Let's not go to the car. Let's go to the garage and hide behind all them chainsaws." So they go hide behind the chainsaws, and then we see them from the back in the next frame. They're hiding behind the chainsaws in the garage, in this lit garage, and we see from behind them they're all making a bunch of noise. They're like, "I'm trying to be quiet. I'm trying to be quiet." And then steps from behind them this guy wearing this big apron and this welder's mask, takes off his mask, and he's like, and we get the idea that he's the killer, right? He's the bad guy. And I mean, why does he have all these chainsaws hanging from the ceiling in his garage anyway? But so, and then we get the tag, it says, "People in horror movies make bad decisions, but you can save 15% or more on car insurance by switching to Geico," or something like that. And then it goes back to the people, and they're running out of the garage, and they say, "Quick, let's go to the cemetery." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, a cemetery is a great place to be in a horror movie." Why not take the running car with lights and get out of there, right? James would also tell us that this is an illustration of wisdom of below. Oh, don't take the running car with lights. Are you crazy? Let's go hide behind the chainsaws in the garage. My friends, when we follow the world's advice, we often find ourselves stuck in a nightmare scenario. Maybe it's financial troubles, maybe it's family troubles, maybe it's job troubles. Now, I remember a friend of mine who got stuck in the cycle of the payday loans. And he was a friend from work who also um, was, kind of attached to our church, and he was doing one of these financial things, financial planning things that we do at church. I don't remember what this particular one was called, but basically he had gotten himself into such of a big hole by taking out payday loans. And it sounds good, right? I mean, these payday loans, I mean, these commercials, they make it sound reasonable. You have these people shouting, "It's my money and I need it now," as if, but it's not really your money yet. You haven't actually earned it yet. You haven't been paid. It's the idea of why wait for your money when you need it? Just get it when you need it. All you got to do is just pay this little tiny loan fee, right? Well, my friend had some extra expenses, and instead of asking for help or for something, he took out a payday loan against his next paycheck. And I mean, I suppose one of those things could work if you keep it to one. It's definitely not a good option. I mean, it's designed for people who obviously have bad credit, but and he took out this loan, and I mean, I used this loan once myself actually, and it was a bad decision on my part, but this person had gotten so far into it, they had taken out a loan against their next paycheck, um, and they paid that bill off. And then when it came time to pay off this loan that they had taken out, well, there was a loan fee attached to that. So obviously there was the amount they had to pay back in a couple weeks was more than what they had taken out. Well, so he paid that back, but then he didn't have any money left. So they offered him the option. Well, would you like to take out another loan? And so he did, because he didn't have any money. And he did that, and then for a couple weeks kept paying these loan fees, and then he got hit with another financial bump, and he found himself not able to pay that loan back when it came to his paycheck, getting his paycheck. He found himself in a little bit of trouble. So what did he do? Well, he went to another place. I think he said he went to a pawn store, and he took out another payday loan against his next paycheck. And he used that money to pay off the first loan. And I mean, you can see where this is going. I mean, he made a lot of decisions trying to face short-term issues and not considering long-term consequences. And eventually these loan fees started to build up on him, and because he got into a pattern of a couple weeks there where he was taking out two loans a week, and he would use one of them to pay off the other one and then take another loan because, again, he didn't have any money. And, well, he never asked for help during any of this, and eventually got to the point to where he took a third loan out. And so he was to pay off the second loan, to pay off the first loan, and then taking another loan out because he didn't have any money. Well, so when he came to this financial seminar, he was literally at the end of his rope. I mean, he was well beyond uh, sound financial planning at this point, and he didn't listen to any kind of wisdom from above. He kept chasing after wisdom of the world. He never considered long-term consequences, and he'd been stuck in this pattern for a few months, basically. And he was thinking about taking out a fourth loan if he could find a place, because I guess you can do this at pawn stores, and then there's specific check cashing places. And so, I mean, he'd already taken three loans out on his next paycheck for the full amount of his paycheck. Yeah. So, and part of the first loan was going to have to be used to pay off the loan fee on the third loan that he'd gotten. It was bad. And, so I mean, it came down to the point to where it's like, well, we as a group, we had to figure out a way to get him out of this situation. And he still had to take out loans for about a month to dig himself out of that hole. I mean, we weren't just going to pay all three of those loans off for him. I mean, for one thing, we couldn't afford to do that. Um, and then we went and got him food from the food pantry, and we said, "Do you have enough money to pay your bills, that you have coming up?" "Yeah, I think so." And he had to live very cheaply for a few months until he got himself back into financial order, and eventually it got to the point to where he finally paid off a loan, paid off the last loan. He started basically he started shrinking it down each week. Each paycheck he would go from three loans to two loans, then to one loan, and then he finally got paid it off. And he said, "I'm never coming back here again." And as far as I know, he's doing fine now. But he got caught up in the wisdom of the world. He was chasing short term issues and not considering long term consequences. Now, my friends, you're always going to be in trouble if you're only considering the wisdom from below. And even wisdom from below eventually would tell you what this guy was doing was not a good idea. But the other thing that James is going to tell us is that wisdom from above and wisdom from below cannot be mixed without disorder. You can't mix wisdom from above and below without disorder and discontent. There's lots of sources of wisdom in our life. There's sources of wisdom like God, for example. When we pray to Him, and Jesus, what He said when He was on earth, the Bible, certainly, are all wisdom from above, sources of wisdom from above. Now, wisdom of the earth, well, that would be things like parents. And don't get me wrong, you may have had good Christian parents that put God first in their lives. Some people don't, but our parents are also human, which means they're fallible. I mean, they're not perfect. You might have great parents. My parents are awesome. My parents have helped me, figure out a lot of things, but my parents aren't perfect, and neither are yours. Sorry. You might have had a good teacher, a professor in your life, friends, certainly. And then, of course, there's screen media, which I'm going to include, things like Facebook, any kind of social media, any kind of TV, news, whatever, basically anything on a screen. There's polls, that's basically say this is what the majority believes, this is how you should think. Politics, which try to tell you how to think. Even the church, which the church is, we try to follow the Bible, we try to follow God, but we're not perfect either. We're wisdom from below as well, even as we try to take in wisdom from above. And after a while, we listen to all these sources, and we start to think, well, I've just got to figure this out for myself. And then we make the worst decision possible. We take all of this wisdom, all of these sources of wisdom, and we make them equal. We say, well, the wisdom that I see in the Bible, the wisdom that I hear from God, the wisdom that Jesus spoke in the Bible, it's the same as all of this other stuff. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting advice from a friend, from your parents, from a teacher, a professor, even especially the church. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not equal to the wisdom from above. That's what we ultimately have to follow, my friends. And we might say, well, I'm creating my own mix for me. This makes sense to me. I'm going to go ahead and do this. But we have to think about this. We have our own sinful desires, our own failings, our own sinful nature that James told us about. Remember that whole thing about being drug away and enticed? And we start think, well, we're doing okay since God's in the mix, but James is telling us when you blend it, it's actually from below. So, I mean, you can talk to your parents, you can talk to your friends, but you have to filter that through. You have to think, am I getting wisdom from above here, or is this wisdom from below? And it comes to, wisdom from below will tell you, well, if it feels right, then it's right. Well, that's not always the case, is it? Now, James points out that sin feels good. And a pastor, a friend of mine, once said, sin does feel good, and if it doesn't, you're not doing it right. I think he was making a joke. But if it feels right, it doesn't mean it is right. When we put ourselves first and God second in order, we get disorder. When we put ourselves first and God second in our order, we get disorder. So what does that mean, my friends? Well, James gives us a couple of life hacks. A few life hacks. The first one being, and I'll give them all three to you actually at once, and then we'll dig into them a little bit. Our life hacks for this week are stop, look, and listen. And I'm going to go ahead and read verses 17 through 18 from the Message translation. I don't often use the Message translation, but as I was doing my research this week, I actually kind of liked this, so I'm going to go ahead and read it. Real wisdom, and this is verse 17 through 18, real wisdom, God's wisdom, begins with a holy life and is characterized by getting along with others. It is gentle and reasonable, overflowing with mercy and blessings, not hot one day and cold the next, not two-faced. You can develop a healthy, robust community that lives right with God and enjoy its results only if you do the hard work of getting along with each other, treating each other with dignity and honor. So number one, stop to care about the one. How do we deal with our selfish ambition, our desire to put ourselves first, our desire to create our own mix, so to speak? How do we deal with this? Well, we short circuit it by doing the opposite. Let me explain a little bit. You see, I don't know if I have a little bit of a obsessive compulsive disorder or what it is, but often I will lock my apartment door when I'm leaving, and I will get halfway out to my car or all the way out to my car, and I will think to myself, did I lock my door? And then there's that uncertainty there. Did I actually lock my door? Did I make sure it was locked? And that's going to bother me. And I will often fight that urge to go back and check. And I'll be standing there, I'm like, it's locked, it's locked. Are you sure? And it's like, I checked it. Are you sure you checked it? It's like, did you, I pushed on it, it was locked. Are you sure you did that? Or do you think you just did that? And it's like, you really should go back and check, and then I fight this urge for a while, and I'm thinking I'm not going to feel satisfied that my door is locked and feel safe about that unless I go back and check. So I always go back and check. And I've, out of probably a million times, I think it's been unlocked once. So, yeah. And so it's like, but then that one time it's like, see, I told you should have checked. But no. So what I've done is I try to short circuit this process because I know it's going to happen. So what I do is I walk out the door and I lock it, and I know I've locked it. But I ask myself, oh, did you lock the door? So then I'll think to myself, let me check. And I'm standing right there. So I I put my hand on the doorknob, I twist it back and forth, I push on it, it's locked. And I just did it like 2 seconds ago, but it doesn't really matter because if I don't do that second time, I'm going to ask myself when I'm on my way to my car. And then invariably it comes up again. It's like, did you lock your door? Oh, yeah, I did. And it's like, are you sure? Yep, I double checked it. Remember? Oh, yeah, okay, we're fine. So there it goes. I short circuited that process. I short circuited that whole line of thinking by doing it right away. Well, James is kind of talking about the same thing here. He says, how do we deal with our unselfish ambition? We intentionally put others first. It's the exact opposite of our selfish ambition, ambitious nature. We short circuit the process of putting ourselves first by putting someone else first instead. And I can tell you, my friends, I've been in situations to where I've been in tough spots, and sometimes when someone does something for me out of the kindness of their hearts and puts me first, it's just overwhelming. You can make a big difference in the life of someone who is struggling. So, number one, stop to care about the one. Number two, look at what you have. Look at what you have instead of what you don't have. If we focus on what we don't have, we become more about getting than giving. Now, envy, jealousy, and coveting will own you if you focus on getting. There are people out there that have to have the new iPhone every year when it comes out. They came out with an iPhone 12, and I did buy one of those. I bought the best iPhone I could possibly get. I have the iPhone 12 Pro Max. It's got the fancy camera, the big storage, the LiDAR sensor, whatever the heck that is. But you know what? I had my old phone for like 5 years before that, and I intend on keeping this phone for 4 or 5 years. So that's not such a big deal. I'm not going to run out and buy the iPhone 13. I'm not going to buy the iPhone 14. I'm not going to buy the iPhone 15. Maybe in 5 years ago, or maybe in 5 years again, when this phone doesn't work as well as it should because it's getting outdated and getting old, and the battery isn't holding up like it should, and the software isn't being made for this phone anymore, then maybe I will go out and buy the new iPhone again. I figured, you know what, I'll buy the best one I can get right now, and it'll last me for 4 or 5 years. That's the best you can expect for a cell phone these days. If you short circuit this desire of getting in your life, then, my friends, your life will be defined more by what you give than what you get, and that's a good thing. My friends, we have to learn to be discontent with our giving and learn to be content with our getting. That's the exact opposite of our nature. Our nature is to hoard and to amass more and to accumulate. We have to be discontent with our giving and learn to be more content with our getting. We have to start getting less and giving more. That's the exact opposite of the world. We have the whole Dare to Dream thing, about what your life would be like if you were, you had all these things, or what your life would be like if you were able to do these things, or what would I've even thought about what my life would be like if I won the lottery, all of a sudden. And I mean, a lot of people have thought about that at one point, which I don't even play the lottery, so that's a dream that's never going to come true for me unless somebody leaves a winning lottery ticket outside my door for some reason. But if we change the way we look at getting and giving, then it will change our lives. So, number one, stop to care about the one. Number two, look at what you have. And number three, listen to your Father first. Where are you getting your wisdom? We live into a world that screams into our lives from all different directions. And my friends, we are going to be tempted to make ourselves the center of our own wisdom. And we'll rationalize that. We'll say, well, I've listened to all of these different sources, and now I'm going to make an educated choice. That's not always the best way, even though the world says it's the best way. I mean, maybe when you're buying a vacuum cleaner, that's okay. But when you're making decisions, it becomes so easy to just, whether we're unintentionally doing it or not, to put ourselves and our own thinking before God, where the Bible tells us to seek first the kingdom of God. And see, my friends, and God will eventually move you out of the nightmare that you may be in and into the dream that He has for you. I'm not saying everything is going to be perfect. That's not what He promises. I'm not preaching prosperity gospel here. There's going to be trouble. The Bible had a lot of people in it, and my friends, very few of them, if any of them, were rich. This isn't prosperity gospel. In fact, a lot of those people, when they started following Jesus, became less rich because some of those people were tax collectors and they had been cheating people, and they went and made it right. Sometimes the only thing that might change right away is you. Stop. Look. And listen. Let us pray. Father, thank you for your message. James can be so blunt, and sometimes it's hard to take, but thank you for your word here. I pray that we would just keep it in our hearts, that we would just stop to care about others, and Lord, just look at our giving and our getting, and also listen to you first, and to put you first in our lives. I pray your blessing on each and every one who hears this today. And thank you that they were able to find me online. Bless us all in your name. Amen. Well, my friends, I'm glad I was able to get this up a little earlier than I have in the past few weeks. God bless you. Have a great week. Bye-bye.